For the first Sunday in April, you found the Georgia Gang. Topping our agenda today, Governor Deal vetoes the Religious Freedom Act. Transportation deals are being cut in North Fulton County, and in DeKalb County, the DA pays a hefty penalty. Some of the stories up for grabs on the Georgia Gang.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
You know, we're especially glad you'll be with us today. We think the weather is going to be pleasant. We can say two great words: play ball, because the Braves get underway Monday, like it or not, and it is Masters Week. Right, Phil?
That's right.
You're wearing your Masters tie?
I've got my Masters tie on.
Yes. Yep. This officially to me means it is spring.
Yep.
When you have baseball, when you have the Masters,
and you have
I think
dogwoods
everything's
and
right.
azaleas.
Thank you.
And,
That's spring.
All right, going back to the news for just a moment, the real news. Governor Deal this week quickly vetoed that Religious Freedom Act passed by the General Assembly. He didn't wait a day or two, he just vetoed it on Monday and made it real clear that he hoped that veto would stick. But Phil, it looks like it will, because the top leaders of the House and Senate say no special session.
That's right. The Speaker of the House of Representatives and the Lieutenant Governor said, you know, we're not going to do that. We're going to wait till next session. It will be back again. We all know that. And just as a comment on it, I think there was some over-emotionalism on both sides of that debate. It's one of the most contentious debates I've seen in probably 25 years at the Capitol. And I think that obviously you're going to have to go back. And the one thing I think that needs to be addressed, and I can see both sides of this, you need to address the issue of religious affiliated associations. One thing I think we maybe missed even on the Georgia Gang, it didn't affect private business.
Yeah, and that's a good point. You know, the AJC got rich last Sunday because they had a full-page ad with hundreds and hundreds of companies opposing the Religious Freedom Act. And I knew many of those companies, many of those folks are my friends. None of them would have been affected. I'm not sure that this bill was properly communicated. It did not affect private business, Jeff. It affected only nonprofit, religiously affiliated organizations.
I think that it could have affected private business in a huge way, and I think that that's why business was so interested in defeating the bill and was so elated when the governor vetoed the bill. Look, I mean, you know, you can't have a state that is openly, wantonly discriminating against a class of citizens in 2016 and think that that's good for business. And I think the business has made that clear. It wasn't just Hollywood. It was businesses that have been here a long time, and the Georgia Chamber and the Metro Chamber and Delta Airlines and others. It's not just folks flying in from Hollywood. I mean, this was unanimous when it came to business opposing this bill. I think that if it comes up again, we're going to have the same thing. At some point, I would really like for Republicans to get back to their roots, being economic conservatives and dealing with taxes and levels of taxation and creating jobs
Alexis,
and in an environment for business and not these social issues.
Alexis, it doesn't apply to the businesses Jeff mentions. It applies to religious schools, religious societies, hospitals that are religious-based. I mean, I just don't see the fuss. Here's what I think. Johnny Isakson a few weeks ago suggested that Georgia follow the federal model. That would be the act signed by Bill Clinton and John Lewis and all those Democrats, right? Well, and so why not have our House and Senate come back and copy the federal freedom of religion statute?
Well, I think the problem is, and this is something that Theron said a couple of weeks ago, it's perception as much as the reality of what they're doing. It's a bill that does not need to be passed because there is federal legislation to cover it, and religious freedom is...
Well, there is a glitch in all of this argument. The Supreme Court came later after that 1993 law and said, wait, that only applies to the federal government. It doesn't apply to the states. That's why all these states, including Florida and some of these other states, have RFRA laws, religious freedom laws. So you've got to fix that. That's why we're having this in state legislatures. You've got to fix.
That's a very good point.
And Jeff, I hope you would want to protect.
No, I don't think that that's why we're having it at all. I think that we're having it because we have a U.S. Supreme Court that makes a constitutional amendment based on the U.S. Constitution, and then you have certain states, Georgia, North Carolina, Alabama among them, and others, predominantly in the South, that want to pull back on those liberties granted in the U.S. Constitution. I think it makes it clear. The governor, in fact, Governor Deal stated that in his message, that it's problematic when we try to interfere with rights already granted under the U.S. Constitution. He made that very clear.
I don't
and
disagree.
I think that's exactly what we're doing.
I don't disagree
What I
with
would
that.
like to do is just draw the parallel, and I know that y'all don't want to hear it, but you're going to hear it anyway.
Yep.
Between 1954 and 2016, this is an act of federal defiance following a U.S. Supreme Court decision
that's a
in
false
Georgia,
analogy.
No,
and
that's
it
a
is the
perfect
exact
analogy.
same thing. And if you don't see that direct line, then your legislators don't see it, and they don't learn from where they were in 1954 and where they are today.
Let me make one last point. Let me ask Jeff just one quick question, and Alexis. Don't you feel there should be some, and I don't disagree with part of what you said on the Constitution, but don't you both feel there should be some protection for religious affiliated organizations that might be holding sincere beliefs?
I think that when you are expanding rights under the U.S. Constitution, as the Supreme Court did in 1954 and as it did in 2015, that is enough. An expansion of liberty isn't of itself enough. And we don't need southern states pulling back on those expansions of our rights under the U.S. Constitution.
Well, let me say this, Jeff. It's going to be just like abortion, Roe versus Wade, where an unelected body overrules the will of the people. Religious freedom, look at a poll that came out this week. 66 to 70% of Georgians support this effort. It's overwhelming.
Well, yeah, but that's the same point as Jeff just made.
I understand that.
The majority of the people didn't want desegregation either.
But across the nation, overwhelming majorities expressed at the polls opposed homosexual marriage.
The courts,
Same
the
idea.
courts are going to ultimately decide this, and that's why the next Supreme Court justice is so important.
All right, is Governor Deal hurt by this? Let's just look at the politics.
No.
That's a good question.
Is Governor Deal hurt by this?
Yep, no.
He plans, he deferred all of his education reform measures until next year,
Yes.
the 2017
17.
session.
But for a good reason.
Yes, because
He got his Supreme Court justices that will uphold the reform because the court has been battling education choice in this state. So
But
I'm
I'm
going to
not
defend him on
sure
that.
the General Assembly is going to go tooth and tongue for his reforms after this mess.
I disagree with you. I think that in spite of this issue, we've got parental choice, which is supported in both political aisles, I would say. And you have welfare reform and tax reform that'll be on the table. And I think both houses will be working.
I'm going to tell
with
you
the
what, I
governor.
think the Governor Deal just aligned himself with the most powerful economic interests in our state and our nation by vetoing this legislation, and that solidifies his position. That makes him
Yeah, he
stronger.
gave a retirement gift to the chairman of Delta.
I don't think that it does much necessarily for his relationship with the General Assembly when it comes around next year, but when it comes to creating jobs, and that's his legacy, is creating jobs and creating an environment for job growth and economic growth in this state. I think he's done
And
a great job.
reshaping the judiciary is his legacy.
We got to get out. What will he do about campus carry now that he has vetoed?
He's got to sign it.
I almost think he's got to sign. Interesting from Jeff. What do you think, Phil?
Well, I hope Jeff's right.
I don't know. I hope he doesn't. That's what I hope.
I think this is one of those rare times.
You only get one big veto.
This is one of those rare times when the moons of Alexis Scott and Dick Williams align.
Okay.
And I hope that he vetoes it. All right. When we come back, all the stuff that we didn't get to about the General Assembly, because there's lots of it. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
We told you last week it is always thus. The General Assembly passes so much on the last day, and we tape the next day, so we're always surprised, and we thought we might wrap up some of those loose ends rather quickly here. The issue of eminent domain and pipelines, the General Assembly said no to a company, Kinder Morgan, I believe it is, that wanted to build a gas pipeline across the length of southeast Georgia. No, that pipeline company's bowed out.
That's right. They wanted to haul diesel fuel, and it was above Augusta, and it was going to run down to Jacksonville. And I've got mixed emotions on that. The reason the company suspended it, not ended it, but suspended it, was because of a bill the General Assembly did at the very last minute. saying that, wait a minute, you just can't do this by seizing people's property. And of course, we're all sympathetic to that with eminent domain, and you have to pay fair market price. However, just last Thursday evening, the company said, you know, maybe we can still do the project without seizing a lot of this property. So there's a moratorium right now, and the legislature's going to study this, and then we're going to come back.
And if you like to sleep at night on a normal basis, the General Assembly said that local communities can regulate fireworks sales. We don't have to say much about that. In a place like, for example, Dunwoody, you probably don't need fireworks till midnight, 2 in the morning, do you? So I think that's a good reform. And also, this is inside baseball, but it's important. We've talked about it on the broadcast before. The Judicial Qualifications Commission is appointed to make recommendations for judgeships. That body's been in a bit of a turmoil recently because they've been investigating and removing bad judges, but they overstepped. So now the General Assembly has passed a law that removes the State Bar Association, the lawyers' lobby, from appointing to the JQC. Did I say it right?
Almost. They don't nominate people. That's the Judicial Nominating Commission. They just check on the qualifications.
Thank you.
But everything else was absolutely correct. And what's happened is the State Bar President, Lester Tate, has really hurt the State Bar and its image. And there's been moves to try to oust him as chairman. He's also chairman of this JQC, Judicial Qualifications Commission. That's why the bill came in the legislature, and it removes, as you point out, the State Bar.
But there's some politics associated with
There
all this, too,
absolutely
because
is.
Lester Tate is a Democrat, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
And his wife is, if I'm not mistaken, is a former public official, statewide public official in Georgia. Isn't that correct?
I don't know about that.
Okay.
I don't either.
Well, maybe I'm wrong there, but I do think that there's some politics that are
I just know that he's a tool of Roy Barnes.
working behind the scenes with all of this, right?
But how do
Well,
you remove
Jeff's
the
right.
State Bar from
Jeff's
Qualifications
right.
Council? That doesn't make any sense.
Well, what they want to do is they want to have the point of power to the governor, lieutenant governor, and speaker of the House, like a lot of other boards. What I don't like about this legislation, I think you would all agree with me, I know you're all for transparency, they want to try to keep most of this secret. And I asked some of the legislators, and they're going to go back and tweak it.
All right, now, Phil, you followed a bill that would allow cameras to be placed in the classrooms of special education students. It's an interesting story.
It is, and this is one of those bills that I'm glad we're focusing. I haven't read on anything about this before, except we had it on Insider Advantage, if I could brag a little bit. But a Democrat, Valencia Small of Lake City, to her credit, said, you know, there's a lot of problems with some of these special ed kids in these classrooms. They come home bruised. No one knows what happened. The teachers are unclear. The parents obviously want to know. So this does allow, you're right, it can mandate cameras in some of these classrooms to kind of help
Does it
monitor.
mandate cameras in all the classrooms?
Not all classrooms. You
Can a
have to-
parent request it?
You can request it.
Okay, I think that's good because there are just horror stories all the time. You're not sure what to believe in that instance because some kids, unfortunately, can be very disruptive.
Right.
And some
Now, more legislative fallout. We mentioned to you last week and in succeeding weeks the fact that there will be a vote in the fall on a city of Stonecrest, which is at I-20 near Lithonia. There also in the fall will be a vote on a new city of South Fulton. And there's a lot of politics in that. And Jeff, I still think that Mayor Kasim Reed of Atlanta has the means to defeat that. It's been defeated before. He wants to annex it.
Well, you know, I mean, annexation, I think, is what we've got. Let's back up a little bit. First of all, we have a balkanization movement in an area already balkanized, which is just amazing and unconscionable in and of itself.
Well, you're opposing College Park and East Point? They shouldn't be cities?
Secondly, it's a natural next step to annex, it seems to me, that area of South Fulton into the city of Atlanta because we have an artificially small city. Maybe a lot of people don't realize this, that we have in metro Atlanta, a core city of 500,000 in a region of about 6 million people, right? And so it's less than 10% or about 10% of the
Thank
total
goodness.
region.
Mm-hmm.
And no, not thank goodness, because if we were to combine some of those, as Zell Miller tried to get us to do 25 years ago and actually gave municipalities and counties around the state an incentive to do so, we'd be saving taxpayer money, right?
Yeah,
Instead of spending so much of it.
What about South Fulton?
Instead of creating new police departments and new
What
fire
about
departments.
South Fulton? You're filibustering. What about South Fulton?
Well, you know,
Mayor Reed does not want
folks,
that.
The folks in South Fulton are going to get an opportunity to vote. But what is the best outcome for South Fulton? And what's the best outcome overall? I think the best outcome overall is a larger city.
I agree. I think the voters rejected it in 2007, an effort to become a city in South Fulton.
Not necessarily because they wanted to be part of Atlanta. It just wasn't clear, was it?
Well, there was an actual ballot where do you want to incorporate as a city, South Fulton?
I know that.
And they said they voted no.
But that doesn't necessarily mean they want to be part of Atlanta,
It
does it?
does not necessarily mean that, but that would make more sense, I think, than clearly what the voters said. They didn't want to be
Max
by
Blau
themselves.
at Atlanta Magazine insists that this is all part of a grand plan by Kasim Reed to allow the annexation of Druid Hills in DeKalb County, and that he'll also end up with South Fulton. I don't really know what Kasim is thinking on this, but I do agree with Jeff. He needs and wants a bigger city.
Well, we need. I don't know if the mayor necessarily needs. The mayor's in his last term, right? He can't run again. I mean, the electoral dynamics of all of this don't affect Kasim Reed at all because he's not going to be running for mayor. But when you look at the electoral dynamics and you look at this influx of suburbanites and millennials and others into the city of Atlanta, you know, and if you want to, you probably want to have an annexation of South Fulton into the city, especially if you're looking at Druid Hills, for instance.
Right, we've got to get out. When we come back, North Fulton residents, get ready. You're about to be asked to approve a Kasim Reed tax on transportation. That's somewhat unkind, but also somewhat true. And in DeKalb County, a blow to the DA who is seeking re-election. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
You'll recall that during the last year, 2015, lots of discussion among the mayors of cities in Fulton County, including Kasim Reed, about whether to authorize or ask the voters for another 1-cent sales tax for transportation improvements, specifically in Kasim Reed's case, MARTA. However, that didn't work out. A compromise was reached. And this week, the mayors of North Fulton cities agreed that they will put on the ballot in November a 0.75 cent sales tax for transportation improvements, not including MARTA.
Not including MARTA.
The city will go with a half penny for MARTA.
That was quite a historic agreement. If you
It
followed,
really was.
if you
at the
followed
last minute
Fulton
there,
County
right. You had Jan Jones
politics.
getting involved in.
Yeah, all
other
Republican mayors
issues
asking for a tax
right.
increase. You call that historic?
No.
Well, no, they're not looking for a tax increase. They're looking for some funds to improve roads and transportation.
That's the
in
kicker.
region,
Jeff's right. It's not MARTA. I'm going to hold my opinion on that
You're
until
right.
I see the project list. And they are going to show the project list.
Right.
There may be an appetite for it.
Oh, I think that there's an appetite for it because people were just stuck in traffic. I mean, there's gridlock everywhere. And in the
Yes,
city
it's
of
crazy.
Atlanta, yes, you do need some funding from MARTA. You do need some funding, I think, for the Beltline, and there can be some funding in here for the Beltline. And overall, it's going to be good for Fulton.
All right, so
And
Kasim Reed goes for MARTA, right?
Right. And my question is, how do you collect 75% of a penny? How do you do that?
A CPA
You probably
can tell you
you
that.
probably collect a penny and kick back a quarter. I don't know.
There is a formula, and that was a good question I once asked when I was a young journalist.
It didn't ever get answered. That's the question.
Well, for the cities of North Fulton, for example, it will raise $500 million to $600 million bucks. Now, if you're sitting in traffic in Johns Creek or Alpharetta, that looks pretty good. We'll
Right.
see what they do.
Right.
So you
It's
just
up to the
add
voters.
0.75 on your purchase, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to have my CPA email you the answer.
All right, turning to DeKalb County, there is a race for DeKalb County District Attorney. Sherry Boston, the Solicitor General, is challenging Robert James, the District Attorney, who's had a fairly, I don't want to say controversial, he's had an interesting run as DA.
Checkered.
Good, checkered, yeah, checkered. Good, thank you, Phil. And this week, finally, the Ethics Commission fined him $2,850, Jeff, for not filing his his campaign disclosures.
You know, we're talking about an essentially toothless ethics commission. I think we'll all agree to that. Have you ever seen a $2,800 fine from this ethics commission? I mean, this is because
But he never filed his disclosures.
That's exactly right. It was year after year after year serial violation from a guy whose job is what? To enforce the law. And in his own, knowing fully well that in his own business and his own campaign finance disclosures, he's not enforcing the law. He's not applying it to himself. This is unbelievable. This is a guy who, you know, went after Bob Lunston, your friend, for $300, $300. And we're talking about year after year after year of violations.
Let's also add,
and the report.
Not to confuse it, let's also add that he reimbursed the county for P-card purchases for meals and the like on trips that were not valid.
You know, you talk about, you know, all the controversy and you know, the goings on in DeKalb County. The only way that we can really right the state of ship in DeKalb County is to get some new leadership. And I think that new leadership obviously is in the CEO's office with Michael Thurman and clearly in the DA's office with Sherry Boston.
So
Well,
we'll see.
I don't disagree with that. I think that's
But Robert
said.
James, it's sort of hard to believe that the sitting district attorney didn't bother to file his campaign disclosures.
No, he thinks he's above the law. Just as a footnote, too, remember what's also galling is he ignored a Freedom of Information
That's
request.
exactly right.
And which is a misdemeanor.
That's right.
Right.
All right, in the city of Atlanta, I think this is important, especially to millennials. The city of Atlanta, the council this week debated whether to allow Uber and Lyft, the ride-sharing services, to pick up passengers at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. And I know what they're doing as city council. It's been going on forever. They're protecting the taxi drivers and the limo drivers. The issue here seems to be whether Uber and Lyft drivers should submit to fingerprint checks. Is that the way you all see it?
That is
That
the
seems to
kicker.
be the main requirement that they are looking for. But I think the train has left the station on Uber and Lyft. I mean, they're here to stay, and they're just going to, the taxi cab industry is going to have to catch up to them.
You know, I agree with Alexis, but you ought to have a level playing field. And if the city thinks that it is important, and in public safety we think that it's important that taxi and limo drivers are fingerprinted, shouldn't that apply also to Uber and Lyft drivers who are at the airport? I think that if we're going to do it, we're going to open it up. Let's just have a level playing field for everybody.
Yeah, well, that's the way it seems to me, too. I don't know
agree.
whether a background check is as good as a fingerprint check. I really don't, but council's working on it. All right, we've got to get out. I'm getting that waving hand. I'll acknowledge it when we come back. Winners and losers.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
Before we turn quickly to winners and losers, I want to get in one more topic, and that is the general question, is Sandy Springs becoming a banana republic?
Oh, my.
There's a special election coming up for city council, a city council vacancy, and guess what? You can only vote in one polling place. If you're voting in the primary on the same day, you go to your polling place and vote for all those offices. But if you want to vote for your city council replacement, you have to drive to the Hammond Park Gymnasium and vote a second time.
Well, it's a very
Caracas.
tricky thing. It's a very tricky thing.
Tegucigalpa.
Unfortunately, the mayor of Sandy Springs is trying to get his favored candidate in, and it's the farthest precinct. I think it's wrong, but there's a bigger issue very quickly, and that is I don't like when either party does these shenanigans like what happened in Sandy Springs, where they tried to have one candidate come in and just
Late.
be unopposed late. And that happened with Representative Tom Weldon's district in Ringgold. The state GOP rightly said, let's reopen the qualifying and have other people able
This
to
is
qualify.
what ultimately happens when you have, you know, these government everywhere, you know,
Well, the
Republican
Democrats have pulled this too, and
you all are pro-government,
Sandy Springs
right?
needs to make Caracas
And
its
if
sister
you had
city.
this strong
Or
Voting
Havana.
Rights Act, they couldn't make all these changes.
All right, how about you, Alexis? Go
unilaterally.
with winners and losers.
Okay, I'm going to salute Atlanta Technical College. They had their annual Bridge Builder Awards evening fundraiser for their foundation, and they recognized several people in the community. And Hank and Billy Aaron were honorary co-chairs, and they pledged 44, remember that number, times the average gift, which is $500. So they gave a total of $22,000 to the foundation. So they're big winners there, and Alveda Thomas, the president, too. Also, Wesley Woods had their annual Heroes, Legends, and Saints Awards, and they recognized several people as well. So everybody's doing good work to support the community.
Speak quickly, Jeffrey.
All right. Well, Governor Nathan Deal, I mean, for obvious reasons, he vetoed that legislation, and I think helps change the image of Georgia nationally and internationally. So he's my winner.
All right, Phil.
You know, Masters Week, the Augusta National, actually our whole economic development, it's the hottest ticket in sports, but it's also a great way for the Chamber of Commerce to bring in people and look at the state.
I have a hotter ticket for you today, the Brookhaven Cherry Blossom Festival.
All right.
The weather should be nice this afternoon. Come on out to Blackburn Park. Should be a nice event. My loser this week is Governor Nathan Deal. Politically, he took a hit. He's got to figure something out going forward. And a winner, John Sherholz, the architect of the Braves' great years, is going to take on an advisory role as vice chairman. We'll see you next week after the Masters on the Georgia Gang.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.